and welcome to the Fall 2024 Linneman Associates Capital Markets webinar presented by Linneman Associates in Real Estate Financial Modeling. Hi, I'm Bruce Kirsch, founder and CEO of REFM, provider of financial tool analysis tools and training to the business since 2009. We have a terrific program for you today. We'll be discussing what's happening in the world with Peter Linneman. We're not going to be doing slides today, so there's nothing to download on the participant end. As far as Zoom goes, you should see the video of Peter and I. And if you, for some reason, get disconnected, just go ahead and reconnect the way that you signed in initially. If you're registered for the webinar, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording in about an hour after the end of the webinar. And so it's been kind of an eventful week, Peter. And normally we don't stray too much into the world of politics because there's plenty else to discuss in terms of data. But I think we almost have to chat a little bit about what your impressions are of where we stand now, given the certainty of another Trump administration.
Yeah, well, and it's more than a Trump administration. It'll be a Republican, a notably Republican Senate, and almost certainly a Republican House, but that'll take a little more time. In an odd way, Bruce, I think I answered what it all means in the last session. Which is it'll have who's president and these policies have some impact on the economy. So it will certainly have some impact. I'll come back to that. But I think, as I said in the last time, more notable is the distributional impact. And I think you saw it yesterday in the stock market. The renewable energy sector down a lot, the fossil up a bit. So I think people need to remember that is much more what politics is about than the quote overall economy. And taking the energy as an example, whether the fossil fuel or the renewables had quote won politically, you were going to turn on the lights tonight when it got dark. You're going to drive your car home from work. That's the general economy, turning on your lights and driving your car. Yeah, you might drive it slightly less with one or slightly more with the other. But boy, the individual companies could gain very differentially. So I think there'll be a mild, better economy effect from this, although we won't know what policies are really instituted for at least 6 months from now. What do I think? Why do I say a bit better economy? The Biden administration this year will be the most pages in the Federal Register. The previous most was the last year of the Obama administration. The Trump administration still had lots of pages in the Federal Register, but it was way, way down. And the only reason I use the Federal Register is those are all the rules, regulations, new laws, et cetera, that businesses and people, and that meant a lot of lobbying went into, and a lot of compliance goes into what are those pages. Those are resources that could have been using for growth, right? That could have otherwise been used for growth. So you time. It's good. It also probably means that the tax bill, which is, beginning to sunset, will be determined by a Republican unified government. And that means you will not see the corporate tax rate go. You won't see the capital gains go up dramatically. You will not see depreciation eroded notably. It means you'll get a renewal probably of opportunity zones, for example, and probably a recharge of those. So, and again, you could argue we need more taxes or less taxes, but there's no doubt in the research that higher taxes is a drag on growth. No doubt about that. And so that's where you'll get a bit more growth. A bit more could be 20, 30, 40 basis points of GDP growth per annum. We're not talking about 3 percentage points. We're talking small.
Right.
You also probably are going to have higher tariffs. Now, just to rewind, Trump raised the tariffs during his first term, generally. The Biden administration basically kept the tariffs. So they weren't anti-tariff. But as everyone knows, Trump talks about raising tariffs more. The research on tariffs says it will have no particular impact on the trade deficit because that's more about foreigners wanting to invest here. Second, it will not save a dying industry. So if you put tariffs on, it generally doesn't save a dying industry. Better, cheaper, faster ultimately wins. However, it can forestall the death for a while. It will do so at the cost of higher prices on the protected items. And that will be a drag on the economy. If you then come to real estate, more economic growth means more demand across the board, more jobs, more retail sales, more money to be spent, more this, that. So it will feed demand a little bit more as a result. And probably the higher tariff, if it really does go through, gets set, markets handling imports will have less industrial space demand, and markets handling domestically produced stuff will probably have a little bit more warehouse demand. It will not be overwhelming, but it'll be there with a subtlety. So I think as much as anything, you'll get, if you made me pick a number, 20 to 40 basis points more GDP growth over the next couple, each over the next couple of years. But remember, there's a lot of other factors behind GDP growth.
All right. As far as the tariffs go, do you think that the specter of higher tariffs, broader tariffs, will cause a short-term increase in industrial leasing activities, manufacturers try to build some inventory perhaps?
There'll be probably a very short-term effect because most items can only be inventoried for so long without taking on fundamental basis risk. I mean, I'm not going to go out and buy my steel for the next 20 years. I might buy it for the next 2 months, but it's unlikely. Why? Because the basis risk is just so high in it. So there might be some temporary effect in that regard, but I don't think it would be a big, long-lasting effect.
Makes sense. So with the discussion of tariffs and the general relationship of tariffs leading to inflation, it seems almost as if the government could potentially be at odds with itself as far as, well, we're trying to lower rates because we feel like we're gotten the pig through the python in terms of inflation. And now if we're talking about enacting more tariffs, that could work against keeping inflation at bay. What do you think about that?
But the tariff part would be second order effects. It would boost the prices of some items, not everything. It's unlikely to boost the cost of a lawyer's service or many other products, right? Look, inflation has ebbed, it's gone. It was brought on primarily because of the shortages created during the pandemic. And not just shortages here, shortages everywhere, and workers that had dropped out of the labor force and not come back yet. And you saw it very vividly with wage inflation. What caused wage inflation? Wage inflation wasn't caused by the Fed. Let's just kind of focus on it. It wasn't even caused by Biden spending. Why do we have wage inflation? We lost like 30 million workers, and it took us several years to get those 30 million workers to come back to work. How did we get them to come back to work? As the economy was growing and demand was growing, employers got desperate for labor and raised wages. That's how the shortage created the wage inflation. That kind of happened for every product across the board. Happened to apartments. It happened to warehouses. There was a slowdown in production in 2020. Many places you couldn't build in 2020 and into 2021. The economy came back, rents went up, and that brought about more supply. As that more supply came on, you saw the inflation disappear. And so, for example, if you look at the last 4 months or so of inflation, using either PCE or CPI, you're basically at 2% year over year. But that's misleading in two ways, in many ways, but two ways that are important that we've spoken about. One is over the last 4 months, there's been basically no inflation. Right? Just basically no inflation. All you have to do is go look up the price index number for 4 months ago and the price index from last month, and you'll see it's basically unchanged. It's not even 1%. It's well below 1%. It's basically zero. And the second is this crazy concept of owner equivalent rent that gets included. An owner equivalent rent, if people are not aware, has a big weight. It's 24% of CPI. So when you see CPI, 24% of whatever CPI is determined by owner equivalent rent. 12% of personal consumption expenditure price inflation is determined by owner equivalent rent. What is owner equivalent rent? It is supposedly the rent that an owner pays to themselves. And obviously, no one has ever paid that. It's very different than a candy bar price or a box of dish detergent or rent. Somebody's paying those things. Really, maybe not everybody. I don't buy alcohol. So, okay, alcohol's in the price index. Alcohol prices, cigarette prices go up. It doesn't hit me, but somebody is buying alcohol and somebody's buying cigarettes. So no one has ever paid owner equivalent rent. It has, for reasons that I can't even explain, been going up very rapidly. And it is the source of most of inflation over the last year and even over the last 18 months. And there are other technical issues. But if you focus only on the items that somebody actually really pays money for, the inflation rate over the last 12 months is 1.1%. Okay, let me just repeat that. It's around 2% if you include owner equivalent. And it's 1.1% if you don't include it, if you only focus on items people actually pay money for. So inflation's kind of yesterday's news. It will actually go up a bit. It should go up. If it's 1.1%, it probably should go back up to 1.5%. If it's been zero for the last 4 months, that's probably a little low. It'll go back up to 1.5%. This is all equilibrating from the bizarre economic effects of the shutdown and so forth, not only here, but around the world. So inflation then might get pushed a little higher by tariffs. So fine, instead of being 1.5%, it'll be 1.8% or 1.7%. That's kind of the magnitude of what you're talking about in that regard. But inflation is, and by the way, if the Fed wants to claim credit for it, let them have it. They don't deserve it because they didn't create the inflation by and large. They may have a slight effect on it. It was simply that demand, thank God, demand recovered from the shutdown and COVID and all that, and supply lagged. It was that simple. And the high prices brought about more supply, and that ended inflation. Now, people, and we talked about this last time, Bruce, people confuse high prices with inflation. There's no doubt prices are like 22% higher than 4 years ago, but they aren't rising over the last 4 months. They haven't gone from 22% higher to 26%. They're still 22% higher.
Right.
For those prices to go down, you need supply to massively exceed demand. Massively. Because if supply and demand are around equal, it's not going to drive prices up or down. And so when people say, yes, prices are still high, yes, and bread prices are no longer $2 cents a loaf like they were when I was a kid. They're never going to go back down there. So it's not a matter of good or bad. You can have inflation under control, but the price level has ratcheted to a new level. And essentially what people want, go back to the wage discussion, Bruce, and I'd be the first to say it, I want the wage inflation part of it, right? Which is about 4% beyond the price inflation part in terms of data. We've had about 4% more wage inflation over the last 4.5 years than we've had price inflation. And what people are saying is, I deserve the wage part. I don't deserve the price part. So get the price part to go away, but not my wage part. That would be lovely, but that's not how economics works. And so it is frustrating, and some people really do suffer. I mentioned I don't smoke, I don't drink. So the overall inflation basket has me smoking and drinking, but I don't smoke or drink. I travel a lot. I travel a lot more than the weight they have in. So there are people out there, absolutely, who have higher inflation rates than the average inflation rate. The average is the average.
Right.
There are people who have notably higher inflations than the average, but that does mean there are people who have notably lower inflation than the average. And so it's a tricky phenomena that way. And the Fed should cut rates. I've been saying that for 1.5 years.
Right. And then I guess we're waiting to see what happens by the end of the
day. It may have
day.
already happened. I don't know. It's usually right around now.
Okay. We'll have to check when we sign off here, but what are your thoughts in terms of the outlook for multifamily as we come into 2025?
Okay, so let's focus on supply, demand, and capital. 3 components, right? Because supply, demand. Right? Demand's still good. You still have a massive underproduction of single family housing. It's not going to go away anytime soon. That means people have to live somewhere. Some people who would like to be living in kind of still being forced to live in apartments by the shortfalls of single family housing. That will continue, and that's great for multifamily. In addition, the economy is going to grow, people are going to get jobs, and they're going to rent apartments. And that's a good fundamental. I don't see any chance of a recession in the next couple of years. I just don't see it. There's still too much pent-up demand. We're still below trend GDP. There's a lot of reasons. Recoveries tend to last 6 to 8 years, and we're just early in the fourth year of a recovery. So all those factors would say demand's going to be good, both from pent up and general growth. On top of that, most people don't know this, but the demographics are a bit of a tailwind right now for multifamily, in that the age group, if you call them the renter age group, sort of 22 to 34,
Right.
that peaks in around 2028. So there is an upward movement between now and 2028 in the number of people attaining that age. And we know that number because up to immigration, they were born some years ago. We know they're alive, right? It's just they're getting older and moving out of high school and into college and out of college and into that age group. So the next 4 to 5 years, you're going to see actually strengthening demographics. On the other side of 2028 is a little bit of a downturn in that regard. Still quite good by historic standards, but it won't be quite that tailwind. And I think people need to worry. So from the demand side, apartments look good. Supply. We had a shortage of supply in late 2020. We had a shortage of supply in 2021 and very early 2022. And NOI shot up because demand was good and supply was short. We then got to mid 2023 into really just about now. And there was a lot of supply that came on because the NOIs were going up a lot and construction debt was cheap. And so you got a spurt of supply. You got a spurt of supply into normal-ish demand. And what that did was give the renter more choices, and that drove rents in some markets quite negative, like downtown Nashville, downtown Austin. In other markets, dampened any growth. And probably over the last year, zero increase in rent over the last year is not a bad summary, some better, some worse. Moving forward, supply is shut down. Not shut down, but way down. So especially by mid 25, 26, and 27, you're going to have low supply years, and we're still going to get growth, and you're going to get that demographic I was talking about. The shortage of single family is not going to go away. So I think rents in almost all multifamily markets have bottomed. I think maybe the downtown Austin, downtown Nashville probably have another 3 to 4 months before they bottom. And then you're going to be in a situation where the demand is starting to outstrip the supply. You'll start seeing rents go back up again. They're not going to go up 20%, but they'll outstrip inflation. Then go to the capital market side. The capital market side, we have below average transaction volumes. That is to say, there's below average capital flows. When you have below average capital flows, you have worse than normal pricing, almost by definition, right? So you know, I've talked about the amount of capital being the determinant of cap rates. Time and time again, written about it ad nauseum, you could argue. And you can is a lot higher than normal. Cap rates are going to be lower than normal because you have a lot of money trying to get the product. And if transaction volumes are below normal, you're going to get high cap rates. So we're in a period still where transaction volume is below normal. Cap rates are therefore above normal. There's a lot of money still on the sideline. I think as the short-term rate comes down, you'll increasingly see money rotate out of cash into longer term, less liquid, higher risk than sitting in cash. Right now, you can get a great, for the last year, you can get a great return net of inflation. So why take on risk? Why take on illiquid? Why take on term? As the short rate comes down, you're going to see, I got to take on risk, term, and illiquidity to get my return. And apartments would be one of those sectors. So I would expect to see more capital come into multi over the next year to 2 years. You'll get transaction volumes from below normal back to normal. As that happens, cap rates will fall. And then eventually you'll get transaction volumes above normal, which will mean cap rates will fall further. If I had to make forecast on cap rates, and some of this comes from a model, but it's just a model, something that has a 5% cap rate today, an apartment that has a 5 cap today, I look for it to have around a 4.25% cap rate in a year to 2 years, just on fundamentals. And if it has a 6 cap today, it'll be down to a 4.9 kind of cap rate in the year to 2 years. Money will flow, and as money flows, you'll see more transactions and you'll see better pricing.
Let's talk about office a little bit.
Do we have to? Do we have to?
Well, I mean, you're invested in an office to residential conversion, so it seems like you have some thoughts on office.
No. And I have a big investment position in a couple of major office companies. Look, office has, this is oversimplified, what I'm going to say. Office has about the same total space demand, not per worker, total. Remember, we have more workers, but we're using less space per worker. And you got a lot of non-decisions being made about space over the last 4.5 years. We have about the same amount of total demand for office space as we had 4 years ago, roughly. That means any market that brought on supply, the vacancy rate went up to the extent that more supply came on, almost mechanically. That means that the fastest growing markets had the biggest increases in vacancy rates because they were the markets that had construction pipelines in order to provide growth that didn't occur. Oddly, the markets that are in the best shape in terms of office are the ones that had no growth because there was no supply pipeline. So they're not robust, but they're in the best shape. The question is, will office demand pick up as employment continues to grow? I've always said yes. How much is ambiguous or not transparent to me, but I believe the answer is yes. There's a bunch of office that was obsolete in 2010. It would have been empty by 2020 except for WeWorks. And WeWorks took a lot of that space that otherwise would have been empty because landlords said, what do I have to lose? And then they subsequently took better space in addition to that. And that stressed the market. And then some other service providers as well, but mostly WeWork. So a lot of the problems for specific obsolete office buildings you're seeing, they died 10 years ago. They got artificial respiration to keep them alive 5 to 10 years longer, but the inevitability is set in. Some of those will be converted, but not many. For every one you find to convert, there's 30 you look at that don't work as a conversion for a variety of reasons.
Right.
Demand, I feel good about the economy, therefore I feel good about demand will happen. It's just not clear what the metric is between a job and growth in demand, which for years was reasonably clear. But I think it still exists. Capital markets, other than the Rockefeller Center transaction, which was quite remarkable, the financing there, capital markets just pretty much dead for office. Nobody wants to lend to it. Nobody wants to buy it. There are a few family offices buying on a per pound basis. There are a few converters buying on a per pound basis. On a what can I use it for basis. The jury's still out. But if there's no money, cap rates are ridiculous. And if cap rates are ridiculous, it's a challenge. It's just a challenge. On top of that, there's a race for quality going on, figuring I want to be as far from an obsolete building as possible. And it's one of the interesting things about competition is you can have a situation where you have too much product and yet you may need more new product. And you don't need it from an aggregate number point of view. You need it from this is what they want point of view. We have to provide what the customer wants, or we have to retrofit what we have to make it what the customer wants, which is a lot of outlay. So I don't expect the capital market to be back for office in the next year. I do expect NOIs start to increase in the next year, not really accelerated. I think we've hit the bottom from an NOI point of view. I don't think we've necessarily hit the bottom in terms of capital markets.
One of the things that we've talked about many times is that the US is unique amongst developed nations in that it's a place of constant positive population growth.
Yeah.
And we are, there's so much in the headlines about immigration and so on. Is this something that we should be concerned about, that where our net positive population growth is going to be impacted, or is it just more humanitarian type of headlines that are blowing up?
It's real. It's real. We've always been a nation of immigration. It's been a great source of growth, been a great source of productivity. It's been a great source of demand. That's what people forget, that when immigrants come in and find employment, they also are buying stuff, right? They eat, they buy clothes and shoes, and they go to the movies and so forth. They always have. So it is a source of growth. And by the way, through most of history, even though we've been a country of immigrants, we don't like them. We didn't like them when they came. And yet, give them 15 years, those people don't like the new immigrants. It's just kind of part of the DNA. So we have a DNA that is essentially nothing but immigration as a background. Secondly, we have a DNA of, and we don't like them when they come. Mm-hmm. And third, we become the backbone of the economy. It's a very odd kind of phenomenon. I do think that, and I'm a huge fan of immigration, huge. I do think there is an argument to be made. You can't have people cutting the queue, and it makes people upset. So round number, in the last 3.5 years, we've had 10 million illegals enter that we know of, that weren't sent back. That compares to about 2 million over the second term of Obama and about 2 million over the 4 years of Trump. So part of what people were reacting to on the immigration was, we already didn't like it when it was 2 million, but we knew they'd become our backbone, so we whine about it. But when it went up by a factor of 5, it really, raised the heat, raised the thing. And I do think there's something, Mercy, Mercy is effectively our daughter from Kenya, and she's come in, she got educated, she's done this, she's done that, she's going through all her processes. And it's a lot of headache. And there is a sense of they cut the queue. They cut the queue. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of the people who are recently legal immigrants don't like illegal, because they cut the queue. Nobody likes people who cut the queue. You've all been at the ballpark and somebody cuts the queue getting their food. Nobody likes that.
And it's always going to be a reality, unless we make a concerted effort as a country to be a terrible place to live.
Yeah, and by the way, if we have no immigrants, it's like if we have a trade surplus, we got a problem, because it means people don't want to invest here. If we've got nobody wants to come here as an immigrant, wow, have we screwed up.
Right.
And the truth is, through our entire history, we largely haven't screwed up. People want to come here. Thank God. Our ancestors, right? Thank God. I once said at a speech in Southern California, when immigration was a big issue, just as George W. was becoming president, I got asked a question. It wasn't a question. It had the voice go up at the end like it was a question, but said, immigrants take all our jobs and they don't work, right? And I said, no, I mean, they work much more on average than native born. That's a statistical fact. That's not to say all of them. They work quite a lot. And then I did an exercise when I asked, this is like a 600 person audience. I said, how many you can trace back to the Declaration? And a few. And how many in Civil War, and how many World War I and World War II and so forth. And what you find is we need immigrants not to fill ULI today. We need immigrants to fill ULI 30 years from now. I just take ULI as an example.
Right.
We don't need immigrants to fill all those buildings behind you today. We need them to fill them 30 years from now, when their children, their grandchildren, and so forth. And what fills all these buildings are you, me, a whole bunch of others who are children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. The immigrant generation struggles hard. They work hard generally. And it's their children and grandchildren. I was just talking to an immigrant friend, and his dream, I had the program in Kenya. It's my dream for the kids in Kenya. I hope that their grandchildren cannot believe how much their grandparents struggled. What a wonderful world it would be if the grandchildren think they're just tall tales when they hear the struggle of the grandparents, right? But that is kind of the American story, that you hear the struggles of the immigrant generation.
Right.
As a grandchild, you go, they're telling tales. It's kind of remarkable.
You're a pretty even-keeled individual, I would say, if I had to characterize you. Maybe too even-keeled. It's a little disquieting how even-keeled you are. You've described yourself as an empiricist, not as an optimist. But you have to have some things that concern you, and some things that in the back of your mind, I don't know if they keep you up at night, but if something were to keep you up at night, looking forward the next 3, 4, 5 years, what are those things?
Okay, on a very short-term basis, like a year, I worry that the Fed actually is as dumb as they appear to be and are going to lower rates very slowly. And if you've got a 1 to 1.5% inflation rate, the short-term rate should be down to 2.25%, and they're going to take a long time to get there. So in a short, and it distorts. It doesn't distort all of the economy. It distorts parts of the economy that depend on short-term money, like buying automobiles. And that hurts people when they can't buy automobiles. It hurts auto workers and so forth. So on a short term, that would be. On a 5-year basis, I worry about fundamental things. I worry about the erosion of education, not just public education. I worry about the diminution of the value of merit, which maybe I'm just an old guy and I think that that's gone down, but I do believe in merit and achievement. Nothing is perfect. And the diminution in the valuation of merit, I think, has gone down. That worries me. The diminution of being uninformed and ill-educated on lots of things. People, it's funny, 30 years ago, you'd say something to someone that they didn't know, and they, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And there was, in some cases, a little sense of embarrassment. Today, ignorance is not embarrassed. Now, there are a lot of times ignorance shouldn't be embarrassed, right? I mean, how would you know? But I find that worrisome. And I worry, and this will sound funny, Bruce, I worry about the over-reliance on, quote, smart people. And the reason it sounds funny is the reason we're doing this is that hopefully people will take something, quote, this smart person and that smart person says, and let it filter into their thinking. But you can rely on smart people, but I think there's an over-reliance in a lot of areas on, oh, those people went to the right schools, or those people are smart. And the reason I say that, I grew up as a working class kid. They, as they used to say, those people didn't have a lot of book learning, but a lot of them were really smart and a lot of them were well read. And today we've kind of got the opposite. We have a lot of well-credentialed people who aren't that smart. I don't know what their IQs are, but they aren't that smart. And in a number of areas, we're relying on advice from people beyond what their capabilities. That keeps me up at night sometimes. But by the way, I want our listeners to know, rely on my advice. That's the exception.
That seems fair. Do you want to talk about retail a little bit?
Yeah, I think retail's doing well because the consumer's doing well, right? So the consumer's doing, on average, not every consumer, on average, the consumer's doing well. They're spending down some of their cash that they built to kind of record levels, and their incomes are growing, and they have jobs. And so they feel pretty good. Also, their wealth's up. And so they feel pretty good. So that means retail's doing pretty well. Having said that, a bad shopping center is a bad shopping center. If it's badly designed, if it's been cut off from the consumers by a better product, it's got a problem, right? I happened to do I was part of a tour that went to see 4 shopping centers down in Raleigh on Tuesday. And what was striking about it to me, and every time I go to a center these days, is how different the tenants are today than 20 years ago and 40 years ago and 60 years ago. Just totally different tenants. It's what makes retail both a great business and a hard business, right? Yes, no one any longer wants a green stamp store. Now, most of the listeners don't even know what I'm talking about when I talk about a green stamp store. When I was about 12, You would go to the markets and they would, as your bonus, you got green stamps and you'd paste them in a book and you go redeem them at a green stamp store. It was kind of a bonus situation. Lots of shopping centers had green stamp stores. You can't find them anymore. But you got a lot of nail salons, and you couldn't have found a nail salon 40 years ago. Didn't exist in shopping centers. So the good news is there's always something new. The amount of food in shopping centers is truly stunning, both as a tendency of restaurants and carry out and so forth. But I was in a relatively new Wegman. I think it was 108,000 feet.
Yeah.
Big. I've never seen so much food. I mean, and not, I think in the middle of that Wegman somewhere was a can of Van Camp pork and beans. But the rest of it was, here's your donuts, here's your cakes, here's your cookies, here's your, I mean, it's stunning. So retail's doing okay. And the nice thing about retail is you don't get much spec development, right? So more or less new supply keeps up with new demand. Not perfectly, but more or less. There's a lot of obsolete product out there. It just is, it happens, but pretty good. Not off the charts because consumption grows slowly. It's doing okay versus online. Online is absorbing about 2/3 of the growth in retail sales. So if you say, not counting auto, if you count how much did sales increase for overall retail, about 2/3 of that was online, 1/3 of it was in stores. So if you compare it to the growth rates of retail stores 30 years ago, it's quite low, but the supply is not growing. So you got no change in supply to speak of, and slow growth in sales. But even though online is growing, brick retail is growing, though more slowly.
We talked a little bit about the trade deficit. Do you have any longer term concerns about, I mean, you say that trade deficit, we should have a trade deficit. And if we don't, we have a problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, think about it. Here's the simplest way to understand the trade deficit. People want to invest here. You want to invest here. I want to invest here. And so do people from abroad. They also want to invest here, right? To invest here, they have to sell us more than they buy from us because they need the dollars to buy stuff here. We only take dollars, okay? If you won 500 million in the lottery today, how much would you invest in Tanzania? How much would you invest in the Emirates? How much would you invest in Moldova? How much would you invest in Guyana? Okay, and the answer is, I doubt if you'd invest much, if any. Okay, now let's say you got $500 million and you're in any of the countries I named. Where are you going to invest? And you're going to try to invest as much of it as possible in the United States for the same reason you and I invest in the United States. It's the largest, most liquid, most dynamic, most honest capital market in the world. Is it perfect? No, it's just a lot better than everywhere else. So that's why we have a trade deficit. I don't worry about it. The other deficit, the twin deficit, is the federal deficit. I worry about wasteful federal spending, which may show up as a federal deficit. But if we had huge amounts of wasteful government spending and we had a surplus, It would still be wasteful spending. It's wasteful whether we have a surplus or deficit. It is the wastefulness that is the problem. People say, yeah, but won't the interest rate have to go up if we keep running deficits? Okay, I'm going to make an analogy. Let's suppose, I have no idea of his balance sheet. Let's suppose Bill Gates, whatever the hell he's worth, has $1 billion in debt. Okay, there's $1 billion in debt, and he has a very personalized line of credit. And he's going to pledge his full faith of his wealth, going to pledge all of his wealth backing that. His interest rate will be quite low, right? If he pledges full. Now let's say he goes from $1 billion debt to $2 billion. He doubles his debt. Do you think the interest rate will go up much if he's still pledging all of his assets against $2 billion in debt? Not really. The collateral's too much. If it doubles from 2 billion to 4 billion, his interest rate's not going to go up much because he still has massive amounts of collateral. That's the United States. That's the United States. We have our debt is not backed by current taxes. It's not backed by our tax revenues. It's backed by the full faith and confidence of the US economy. Now, I don't want higher taxes, but it backs that debt. When the debt goes up $1 trillion or $2 trillion, it's small compared to the collateral backing the debt, not the taxes backing the debt. The collateral. What's the collateral? The whole economy. So we have about $165 trillion in current household wealth. And if you did the present value of our GDP, which is not just the money we have right now, but the money we're going to have next year and the next year and the next year, and your kids are going to create in 25 years and so forth, it's probably 800 trillion or 700 trillion. The debt going from net of government owes itself money, the debt going from 19 to 20 to 21 to 22 to 23, given that amount of collateral, is trivial. It won't affect the interest rate much. And in fact, there's research that shows there's no notable relationship between debt outstanding of the US and the interest rate. And that's why it is so over collateralized. By the way, it's not like Argentina, which is not over collateralized in that regard. So we'll have theater. We'll constantly have theater on the federal debt, right? Which, we're going to not approve a budget and we're not going to do, and we're not going to do. By the way, that theater ends the same way every time, right? I don't even know why people get excited. You know they're not going to stop paying Social Security. You know they're not going to stop really paying employees. You know that they're going to pay the federal debt. Okay, they might be 2 days late. I don't know about you, but most of the people on this call have been more than 2 days late on their debt a number of times, right? So it's a non. So the deficit does not drive interest rates. We just have too much collateral for it to have a notable effect. If I told you we have 165 trillion in household wealth, and I told you the federal debt was 162 trillion, and it went up $1 trillion, then it'll affect the interest rate a lot. But taking it from 19 trillion of net debt to 22 trillion, not going to have an impact given you've got 165 trillion of collateral and 28 trillion, 29 trillion of income a year.
Let's wrap up by talking about markets. What geographies interest you the most right now as far as growth that's outsized, perhaps?
Well, I've been, like most people, the Sun Belt has long-term fundamental advantages. in terms of growth. The problem in the Sunbelt markets for owners of property are that it attracts a lot of developers because there's a lot of growth. So for developers, if I were a developer, I'd go to the markets that have had the highest population growth over the last decade, because history tends to repeat itself. And I was looking at numbers, Bruce. When I'm born, Las Vegas metro area had 34,000 people, and it has 3.1 million today and 100 million visitors. I don't think it's going to go back down to 34,000. I just don't. And so growth tends to beget growth. So as a developer, I'd go to the high growth population, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Orlando, Vegas, Phoenix. If you are investing, it's a little more nuanced because it's supply and demand. And everybody talks about barriers to entry, but most markets are not as high barrier to entry as people say. And it's kind of like there's a scene in Godfather 2 where they say it would be almost impossible to kill Hyman Roth as he comes back in from Israel. And Michael Corleone says, if history has taught us anything, it's that anybody can be killed. And the equivalent of that is that if history has taught us anything, any market can be overbuilt by a determined enough group of developers in a market that has a lot of money. So I like markets. Let me give you one, Charleston. Charleston has become a tourist center. Charleston has become a business center. Boeing's not going to go out of business because the U.S. government will not allow Boeing to go out of business. They're not going to say we're going to depend on a Brazilian company and a European company for all our aerospace needs. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
And so, and more of what Boeing does, in my view, is going to happen in Charleston rather than Seattle. Seattle's expensive, Seattle is union, Seattle is difficult, and so forth. So I like a place like Charleston, and Charleston does have some barriers, some natural barriers to entry. I know I'm just picking one. The mid-weather markets are also getting more attractive, continue to get more attractive. What I mean by mid-weather, I can stay there year round and not die in either season. So what's that mean? The Raleighs, the Charlottes, the Charlestons, the Atlanta, the Nashville. They're never going to be as good a weather in winter as in Florida or in Arizona, but they're never going to be as bad a weather as those others can be in the depths of summer. Yeah, that would be a general view.
Great. Well, thank you as always, Peter. It's enlightening, and we appreciate you sharing your insights. You share a lot more of your insights every quarter in the Linneman letter, which is the hard copy publication. You can find more about that on the Linneman Associates website. And if you're registered, just remember you will get an email in about an hour with the link to the recording. I was informed by no less than a dozen people that the logos that are on my background are backwards. And that's actually, that's you, that's not me. If you hit the side of your monitor hard enough, they should spin around.
It'll spin around, that's it.
But that's me trying to also make sure everyone knows about our refi certification program. We're just wrapping up the first cohort and already enrolling for the January 20th start cohort. So you can find out more about that at getrefm.com.
And Bruce, Peter, I have just one thing I say every year at this time, which is we're not going to see you until we're not going to see our viewers, listeners until the new year. Remember, during this holiday season, first of all, to love the loved ones and that not everyone is as fortunate as us, and pause for a moment, whatever it is, and lend a helping hand, and you'll be better for it. So
Yeah.
have
Well
a great
said.
holiday season, everyone.
All right. Thank you again, Peter, and we'll see everyone in 2025.
Thank you.
Take care.